All right, so we just covered how to post content. You got those ideas, but how do we make money? All right, so now let's transition to monetizing content. So there's 8 pieces I'm gonna cover here. The give to ask ratio, how to ask, scaling content, how I do it, why it's worth it, 7 lessons I've learned, and my first post. So I'll actually share the first post of content I've ever made in my entire life. So you'll see that at the end. And then benchmarks to kind of measure yourself here. All right, so same as warm outreach, I'm gonna give you those kind of stats that you can work off of. All right, so let's rock and roll. So the give ask ratio. So Gary Vaynerchuk, kind of popularized the whole concept of like jab, 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 right hook. So give, ask, okay? And it works exceptionally well. And here's why it works, reciprocity. So if you give to people and you keep giving, eventually people feel indebted to you in some way and they want to give back to you. All right, and so what happens is people call it different names, goodwill, positive intent, whatever, customer surplus, but people are like, man, I really want to buy something. Hey, what do you have for sale? Hey, I want to support, right? When you start getting those messages, it means you're doing it right, all right? And if people start reaching out to you saying, hey, can you push my product? It means you're building a brand. All right, so if no one ever asks you to push their thing, it's because you don't have goodwill, and they can see that. So that's a little signal that you're doing the right thing. All right, so think about it like a bank account. You deposit, and you withdraw. That's in simple terms, and I'm gonna give you way more numbers behind this in a second. So believe it or not, the give to ask ratio, said differently, has actually been super studied by the biggest media companies in the world for a very long time. And so, because think about it from their perspective. Their goal is to make as much money as humanly possible in advertising without losing their audience, right? And so television has a certain amount of commercials. Like, why don't they run exclusively commercials? Well, because if they did, no one would watch. And then they would, in the short term, maximize their advertising, but in the long term, they'd kill their asset, which is the attention, right? On the flip side, why don't they do zero advertising? Well, they wouldn't be able to pay for their bills either. And so there is a sweet spot to how can we maximally monetize the attention while also maintaining the attention. And I'm gonna delineate that because there's also a way to keep the attention and grow it, okay? So in the stable or mature platforms like television and even Facebook now, here's the crazy thing, Facebook's 20 years old now. I wanna feel old, all right? Both of those are mature platforms. So that means the stage of the life cycle that they are in is that they are cash cow businesses. They just continue to print money and they're not really trying to like take over market share. They have a huge percentage of the market and now they're just printing money. They're profiting, right? They're reaping right now. They're not sowing. Okay? And they have studied this, and I found this incredibly interesting, I think you will too, which is on television, per 60 minutes of content, they run a 3.6 to 1 ratio of content to ads, okay? So it means they have 47 minutes of content to 13 minutes of commercials or advertisements, all right? Kind of wild. When you think of 13 minutes per 60, like it's pretty decent, but people are willing to watch commercials as long as they know, because, and what do? They give you a cliffhanger and then a commercial to hook you to keep watching until the commercials are over, right? Now, on Facebook, because the platform is different, it works differently, but the concept is the same. So on there, for every 5 posts, 4 of them are content, and then 1 of them is an ad. And so by doing that, they have a 4 to 1. So between 3.6 to 4, I think right in that range, and that might be because they can't divide out the minutes the way television can. To do 3.6, you can't do 3.6 posts, right? So they probably just round up to 4, and they might be growing faster than television is. Who knows? Maybe a little bit more than television does. All right, but here's a really key point I want to underline. These are not super fast growing platforms. These are platforms that are maximally monetizing the audience they already have. And so if you decide, you know what, I'm done growing, I just want to maximally monetize, then this is the ratio you follow. Between 3 and 4 to 1 in terms of the ratio. But I don't know about you, but I would rather monetize and grow. So that's what I'm going to show you. So if you want to look at what to do to grow your audience, look at what the platforms do when they're in fast growth. So TikTok recently came on the scene, recently-ish, right? Came on the scene, and what did they do compared to Facebook? They have far fewer ads or 0 ads for years. So what are they doing? They're giving, comma, giving, comma, giving. And by doing that, they create so much positivity, so much goodwill, so much value that people share it more, and then more people attracts more people to the platform, share, attract, and then it compounds. And then the thing goes huge. And so maximally monetizing doesn't mean maximally growing. And so it depends on what life cycle you're in. For me, I just want to keep growing. And so my ratio of asking the audience for something is significantly less than what these other older platforms do, okay? And so here's how I like to describe it. Give until they ask. So it's not give, ask, jab, right hook. And again, context. We're talking like that is, and again, you can't fit that into like a saying. If you said give, like it'd be very hard. All right, but I want to break this down just tactically for you, is that you want to just keep giving until people say, hey, you're great, can I pay you for something? And then you say, yes, I do accept money. And then you know that you've built goodwill, all right? And so here's how I do it. You give in public, you ask in private. This is the pro tip version, this is the advanced version. That way your reputation stays purely on giving. And so you don't even ever have to right hook in public ever. You don't have to ask ever. You just keep giving, keep giving, keep giving. And when that person messages you, then you can have a conversation. And then as far as, just like I said earlier, with your reputation is only, with the 99.9% of people that never do business with you, is just based on goodwill. And that continues to compound and grow at a faster rate than anything else does. All right, so here's the bottom line, is that the moment you start asking for money publicly is the moment you decide to slow down your growth. So the more patient you are, the more you will get when you finally make the ask. Now that being said, is there a ratio here where if you give 100 times and ask once and then give 100 times again, you'll keep growing? Of course, it's a ratio. It's to what extent, all right? But when I say that, I mean you veer from the maximally growing path by making any ask. And that's okay. You got to pay your bills. You have a team. You've got people. It's fine. I just show these as polar extremes, right? 100% ask, no one will pay attention to you. 100% give, everyone will pay attention to you, and it'll be hard over a long period of time to make money and feed yourself. 4 to 1-ish, which is the middle ground where you don't grow, but you do monetize as much as you can. And then we want to be, in my opinion, on this side of that ratio, especially if you're trying to grow your audience and make money. All right? And the further this way you are, the faster you grow. And you just want to make sure that if you are going to right hook, that it counts. And ideally, if you really want to be smart about it, like the real, is that when you do a right hook to an audience, believe it or not, you can continue to reinforce your brand and actually continue to deposit goodwill if the thing you sell is exceptional. And the real is that most people's things are not exceptional. And so that's why it is a deposit, withdraw. But if you really play the game of business right, you deposit, and then you make money and still deposit. And so if someone chooses to buy a book for me for $2.99, do I think that that transaction nets them significantly more for my brand? Yes, I do. And so even though Amazon, Jeffy B won't let me give the thing away for free, I'm willing to do it at the lowest cost possible on the platform because I still think that it grows the brand and it reinforces goodwill. And so the idea is that brand over everything. And so you reinforce your brand with the giving that you're doing in your content, and ideally, you reinforce your brand with the value of your product. And when you do that, everyone just continually wants more, and that's where you want to be. So that is the give-ask ratio. So you're like, okay, Alex, great. Well, I do need to feed myself. Understood. How do I ask? Here's how you do it. So, or at least here's how I do it. If you're going to ask in public, here's my preference, is that think of ask like commercials. You interrupt your own value with commercials about the stuff you sell. So here's me dancing on video, and they say, hey, by the way, here's this thing, you might like it. If you're this type of person, I think it'll work really well for you. Okay, great, back to where we're going. That's it. Very simple. Just like a commercial on television, just like one of those posts, then you get back to providing value. Now, again, long term, that value that you asked them for should provide even more, and then guess what? The next time you do a commercial, even more people will choose to take action. And that's where you create a reinforcing cycle and a virtual cycle of growth that compounds over time. That's why people spend so much money to get brands, because there's goodwill in the audience. All right? And so there's two ways that you can make the asks in an audience. There's integrated and intermittent. Those are fancy words, but I'll explain what they mean right now. All right, so integrated means you can advertise in every piece of content so long as you keep your give to ask ratio high. So if I have a 60-minute piece of content and I have a 30-second, hey, by the way, then that's okay because my give to ask ratio is still 59 to 1, right? I'm still far more giving per unit of time than I am asking. Now again, like I said, if the ask reinforces later, then it's okay, and that's what you want, but still at a basic term, that's what it would look like. Single piece of content unit, content unit, offer, content unit, content unit. Right? That's the idea. So the example, like I said, boom. And we're well above the 3-to-1 ratio or 4-to-1 ratio if we're doing 58.5 minutes to 1.5 minutes of asking. All right? And I want to tell you a quick story, this cautionary tale. So I don't want you to be like my friend. So I had a friend who had a podcast that blew up really quickly. He was really eager to monetize his new audience, so he started making offers, right? Asking too frequently in the content. All right? So his podcast not only stopped growing, it actually shrank. And stop being a source for him because he started making content, it blew up, it was really good value, and then he made an ask, he made a ton of money, and he was like, oh shoot, I should do more of that. And it makes sense to do it, but you have to hold yourself back. He made the ask, and what he needed to do was go back to doing what he did before, regrow the goodwill in the audience, and then ask again later. But instead, what he did is he asked more and more and more. What happens is he got less and less and less from every ask, and then he asked more and more and more because he needed to pay his bills. And you don't want to get into that vicious cycle. So you want to hold it back as much as you possibly can, and then only ask with your hand open, not shoving it down their throat. All right? So my preference here is that I integrate the asks, aka CTAs, after a valuable moment or at the end of content. All right? And so consider trying one of those places first and making sure your audience growth doesn't slow down, and then you can add in a second, a third, and so forth. All right? And by the way, little tactic for you, if you have written word, a PS statement besides the headline is the most read piece of content, any kind of written word. Because most people read the top and they'll scroll to the bottom, see how long it is, and they'll read the bottom. And so that's how most people read. And so make sure that those two things are some of the most powerful things you have. So if you want to have a CTA, you can put in the PS or the PPS. And a lot of people read it. All right, so that's how you integrate it into the pieces of content. The other way to make the ask is intermittent, okay? Fancy word, but it just means in between, okay? So better for short form content in general, because it's really tough to make like imagine if I had to keep my give to ask ratio on a 20-second short, I'd have to do a 1 second, like I'd have to talk really, really fast to make it happen, right? And so realistically what happens is you make many, many pieces of content, and then every once in a while, one of your pieces of content still formatted to hook, retain, reward, but also make an offer embedded within, okay? And so the second way you monetize it is through the intermittent asks, and that's how that works, okay? So you make good pieces, pure gives, and occasionally make an ask piece. So it might be 10 to 1, and the 11th is an ask, or it might be 50, and then the 51st is an ask, all right? But the idea there is that no one's gonna stop listening to you, because they'll be like, okay, well, that makes sense. He's gotta pay his bills, I get it. And so those are the two ways that you can make your asks within your content while keeping your brand growth at its highest potential and keeping goodwill in your audience, at least that I have found. And so let me give you a little lead magnet example to make this real. So if I just talked about a way to get more leads on a post, a video, or podcast, et cetera, I would then say, hey, I have 11 more tips that have helped me do this. Just go to my site to grab a pretty visual of them. By the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, go to my site and grab a pretty visual of them, all right? And as long as I have an audience that wants more leads, so if you want more leads, by the way, go do that, this will get some of them to engage. All right, so then the thank you page after the opt-in page for my lead magnet would display a paid offer of some kind, which I don't have because there is no paid offer, but if I did have that, that's what I would do. And bonus points if your lead magnet is relevant to the content you're advertising it, right? So if I'm talking about how to like clean skateboards, then I might say, hey, I have a free skateboarding, again, remember we can have our lead magnets in different ways. I can give you a free bottle of the solution that cleans the skateboard. I can give you a PDF that explains how to do it. I can give you a video of how to explain how to do it. I can do a call to walk you through it. There's a lot of different ways. I can say you can bring it in and I'll do it for you, ship it in for free. And what do? I get a customer for life, so hopefully every other time they need to clean their skateboard, they come to me. Like lots of different ways, but if I'm talking about cleaning skateboards, then that's what I make my lead magnet relevant to. And if you do that, then you already have selected for the audience that has found this topic interesting and probably has this problem, and so you are offering a way to make their life easier. And you get more leads. And so here's an offer example. So if you were going to just go for the jugular with your core offer and go straight to the sale, that is, again, the most direct path to money, we model our offer from the last chapter. All right, so hey, by the way, guys, if you've enjoyed my content, I'm looking for 5 people who are trying to achieve XYZ in time frame. The best part is you don't have to, effort and sacrifice. And if you don't get the dream outcome, I'll do 2 things. 1 is increase the perceived like of achievement, and 2, I'll hand you your money back, all right? And I will work with you until you do. And I'll do this because I want everyone to have an amazing experience with us because I'm confident I can over-deliver my promise. So if that sounds fair, DM me, book a call, comment below, reply to this email, etc. All right? Now, I don't have a call to action. That's not mine. I'm just saying that is how I would embed it. So you can either make a lead magnet as the thing that you're making as your CTA, or you can make the offer integrated or intermittent. Either of them work, and that is how you monetize the content, okay? And so as an example here, inside of the books, so this is the offers book, and now that you have the leads book, at the end of every chapter, I say, hey, by the way, there's more stuff online that goes in more depth on these topics that I couldn't fit into the book. And I have some downloads and some swipe files that you can grab. And so people then go grab that. Now, if you're watching this for the first time on YouTube, go check out the book, right? And so you can cross-promote the things that you have. It's an easy way to integrate lead magnets into the content you have, all right? So you can go do that, by the way. It has a bunch of 5 stars. People like it. Okay, so right now, your action step is to do 1, pick. So pick either integration or imminent strategy, and then pick whether you're going to do a lead magnet or core offer. And then get back to giving. Cool? Awesome. And that's how you ask. So now we go to scaling content. So you're like, okay, I got to make content. I get the give to ask ratio. I know how to ask. So how do I make more content? Good question. So there's 2 approaches that I tend to think about. One is depth and width, and the other is width and depth. And so I'll explain how this works in sequence, okay? So if you're going the depth then width approach, it means you go deep on one platform. So step one would be to post content on a relevant platform. Most of you aren't even doing step one, so do that first, all right? Remember, steps, big outcome at the end. Step two is you post content regularly on that platform. So now you're not just posting once, you post again and again and again on a regular cadence. Step three is you maximize the quality and quantity of the content on that platform, all right? Short form, you can usually you can get up to 10 times a day sometimes on like Twitter, on TikTok. And again, I don't want to date myself with this. This will probably apply to most short form platforms in the future too. All right. Long form, you might have to go up maybe once a week, once every 5 days, every few days before you realize that your audience can't handle or consume as much. All right. And so there is a sweet spot there that's usually significantly less than shorts. Now, once you've maximized the quality and quantity of the content, you then, step four, add another platform. So you basically go as deep as you possibly can, maximize one platform, and then you go to the next platform. And you repeat steps 1 through 4 until all the relevant platforms are maximized. All right, so the pros on this is that you maximize your return on effort. So if you have fewer resources, sometimes this is an easier way to do it because audiences compound faster the bigger you get. And so if you're good at one platform, then you doing more effort on that platform will usually get you more reward than also starting new on another one from a resources perspective. Like you don't have the resources to do that. All right, the cons, and this is a con, is that you have less low-hanging fruit. So you have less there's no omnipresence. If they can only find you on Instagram, they can only find you on your blog, they can only find you on YouTube or whatever, all right? And you become dependent on a single channel. Now, if you post racy stuff, that can be tough because you can get shut down or your reach can get constrained, et cetera. And that can be tough for a business if you rely on that lead flow. And so there are pros and cons for both. But if you are resource constrained, it's likely that depth and width will be the best first shot for you. Especially if you've never made content before. Don't try and master multiple platforms without even mastering one. The other way of doing this is the width and then depth approach, all right? So step one here is you post on a relevant platform. Step two is you post regularly on that platform. Step three, and this is where it differs from the first one, is that rather than maximizing that platform, you say, great, now I'm just gonna go to another platform, all right? And you wanna make the next platform the closest one to the current one. So for example, I showed you earlier an example of TikTok, a Reel, and it was 3 short video platforms. That one short video, it takes not a ton of extra effort to format it to each of those platforms. And so if you have a style of content that multiple platforms use, then all you need to do is that LinkedIn, Facebook for divider and just format it so it looks like other content that performs on that platform. And that's it. And so that can get you some low-hanging fruit faster if you know how to make short video or short text, right? And then that generalizes across platforms, right? And then at that point, step 4, you continue until you're relevant to all platforms. And then in step 5, you maximize all of them at once. All right? And so the pros are that you get a broader audience faster, all right? And you can repurpose it with little effort. The cons is that it takes more skill, more attention, more time, and more labor to be effective. And often, there's lots of bad content everywhere in the beginning. You gotta learn. There's no better way. It really just depends on you and your skill set today. So if you are starting out, I probably recommend doing the depth and width. If you are kind of like a little bit more experienced in terms of creating content, et cetera, then width and depth might be a better overall call for you, okay? So, scaling content. Now, how do I do it? So, I'm not a full-time content creator. I run businesses, but content creation is part of my responsibility. And so this is my simple process for recording. So one is that I find topics using the 5 ways that I went over in the hook section, all right, from the last long video. 2 is that I sit down twice every month and I record 30 or so short clips based on step 1. So I look at my calendar, I look at my tweets, and I say, okay, these are the interesting things, and I'll make videos on that. And on the same day, I record 2 to 4 longer videos unpacking tweets that had more stories or relevant examples, and this creates my longer form content, okay? So if that sounds really simple, it's because it is, and you just have to start, and then you can add volume over time. I have now been doing that for 2 years, and that has grown an audience of 5 or 6 million people at the time of this video, just from just that. So twice a month. So I think that most people dramatically overestimate the time it takes to make, and they dramatically underestimate what they should be talking about and making sure that the stuff's actually good. Because if you have good stuff, you can even have a very small quantity and it will spread very, very far. Like instead of thinking, how will this content perform? Just think, how do I make this good enough that they would want to share it with somebody? If you think about the prospect of the person who's consuming this and you think, how can I make this valuable enough that they're like, oh, I didn't know that, or oh, I should share this with somebody. That is what the platform will reward you for. Because think about it this way. If I own a platform, what do I want? I want to bring more people to my platform. So what would I do? I would incentivize content that people send to other people off the platform to bring people onto my platform. And so I would bet that across almost every platform, stuff that is shared is the stuff that goes most viral. And so think about it from that perspective, and you'll often make better stuff than you did if you just say, I want to make good content. I want to talk about what I want to talk about, which is good for the long term, but ideally you want to crisscross with stuff I like talking about and stuff my audience wants to hear about. So that's how I do it. Not how you have to do it, just how I do it, because I get asked all the time. So here's why it's worth it. So let me tell you a quick story. So back when I had Gym Launch, all of a sudden our paid ads weren't working as well. And we're like, that's weird. So we're at a quarterly and we got all the heads of all the departments together and we're going over like, what happened? And Layla, in her very wise fashion, after the team's debating, was like, wait, what did we stop doing 12 weeks ago that we're no longer doing now? And as we talked about it more, we were like, well, Alex stopped making gym-specific content. I started going general. And I was like, well, I don't know if that's the thing. I don't know if that's the reason the ad stopped performing. Let's find out. And so then I surveyed my customers, my existing customers, and I found out from the survey that 78% of our customers had consumed at least 2 pieces of long-form content prior to buying. And this was a massive breakthrough aha for me when I realized, shit, this whole time I had been attributing the success of my advertising to the paid advertising when it was really the content and goodwill that I was delivering in the long form stuff that the ads were only squeezing or right hooking that audience for. So think about it this way. If I only gave to my audience in my content and then I ran ads to my audience back to then scoop up the people who wanted to raise their hands at that time because they'd consumed enough content, that is how the dynamic worked. But I didn't know that, and that's why I'm sharing the story with you. When you make content, it makes everything else work better. Same way if you do cold, warm outreach. If people see your thing and they click over to your profile and they see a bunch of valuable stuff, they're way more likely to respond to your thing or even believe you when you make an offer for money later. Because, shoot, you've actually already provided value to them and you didn't even know it. And that stuff continues to provide value to everyone who watches it forever, which is great. So let me give you 7 lessons that have served me well. Number 1, for making content. If you're starting out, switching from how to how I is one of the easiest ways to kind of take your ego out of it, right? It's not saying like, here's how you should. It's like, no, here's how I did it, right? Like, here's how I make content. And people ask me all the time, this is why I made this course, all right? So this is how I make it. I make my oatmeal this way, not you should make your oatmeal this way. How I built my 7-figure agency versus how to build a 7-figure agency. And my favorite way to generate leads for my business versus this is the best way to generate leads for a business. See the difference? It's subtle, but one of them is like, oh, he's just sharing his favorite ways. What's wrong with that? My 3 favorite ways to retain people. List step stories. Is it the best ways? I don't know. They're my favorite. And so it's different, right? And so it hits different. And I think people are far more receptive to it because they're not trying to disprove you. They can just listen because you're not trying to claim anything. Number 2 is that we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. And so your audience doesn't listen to 100% of your stuff 100% of the time, right? 1 in 6 people in my audience, because I did a survey, didn't know I had a book, despite posting about it literally daily for 2 years. 1 out of 6 were like, oh, I didn't know you had a book. I was like, my God, where have you been? You know what I mean? And so there's the story of Ford, Henry Ford, or one of the Fords in the family. And he was walking through his headquarters. And he walked past the marketing department every day. And he kept seeing this ad, right, that they were working on and all this stuff. And he kept seeing this finished product. And 3 months in, he was like, hey, John, he's like, when are we going to switch the ads up? He's like, I'm tired of seeing this ad. And he's like, Henry, we haven't even launched it yet. And so the moral of the story is that like we usually get sick of our content way before our audience even knows your name. All right, and so you have to repeat yourself significantly more, way more, for years than you ever think. Like, well, I made 1 post about it. They know. 1% of your audience knows, right? And so don't be afraid of repeating yourself. People need to be reminded more than need to be taught. I mean, shoot, a lot of people you probably listen, myself too, sometimes listen to the same people because they have the same message because I want to be reminded to be kinder, be more patient, be harder working, whatever it is, whatever that trait is. And so if I were that content creator who talks about patience, then I might talk about patience all the time. Why? Because today I need to consume that just like I did yesterday because I want to be reminded. And so you might be bored of it, but your audience might still want it. Number 3, puddles, ponds, lakes, and oceans. So in the beginning, in my opinion, narrowing the scope of your content will help you win against a smaller market. All right, so in my opinion, in the beginning, I'd rather compete in a small pond with little guppies that I got to fight against until I'm the biggest guppy, and then I can jump over into a lake, and then fight against the lake fish, and then jump over into the ocean and fight against the ocean fish. If you're a guppy and you go into the ocean, you're screwed, right? And so if you have a small local business, you probably shouldn't make general business content. It's not that you shouldn't, it's just that the likelihood that you succeed is really low. Why? Because there's massive business tycoons that make content, and if I'm gonna pick between two, even if it's the same content, I'm gonna listen to the guy who has more credibility. And so you wanna be credible about whatever it is. And so what you do is you draw a smaller and smaller circle about what you're credible about and that you can't be questioned on. All right, so here's an example. So if you're plumbing, like you're a plumber in a certain town, and if you do that, you can become king of that plumbing puddle in that tiny little town. And over time, you can expand your plumbing puddle to the general local business pond, and then the lake of brick and mortar chains and so forth, and then eventually the ocean of general business. All right, and so the idea is that you take small steps outwards as you gain more and more credibility. All right, because I think I want to say it's probably the number one mistake that I see, at least I perceive it as a mistake, is that you see the 20-year-old life coach. They don't have a lot of credibility because they haven't lived that much life, right? It's tough, even if their stuff's amazing. It's just not the credibility. But if they talk about the struggles that they have experienced and gone through, and only talk about their story, and talk about people they have helped, not what you should do in general for everyone, but talk about what they have done for the few people they have done it for, no one can question that. Here's Sarah, I talked to Sarah, and Sarah overcame her anxiety issue, and here's how we tackled it. No one can question that. No one's gonna attack you for that. But if they find value in it, then they might follow you. And what happens is, over time, if you do that enough, you might grow big enough that then you can start taking a sidestep and go a little bit broader. It's like, across all the people that I've worked with, this is what I found. Again, I'm just going a little bit broader. But again, no one can question me because I'm talking about what I've done, not about what someone should do. And that, in my opinion, is how you expand from puddles to ponds to lakes to oceans. Number 4 is that content creates tools for salespeople. So this is really tactical for the business owners, okay? Is that some content will perform better and get more people interested in buying your stuff. It's just natural. Some stuff just is a little bit closer to what you sell, right? And that content is gold because it's money for your sales team. So if you post a piece of content, all of a sudden you get a bunch of inquiries, I'm not saying post more of that content because it's probably a little bit closer to a right hook, and that's okay. You might have accidentally done it. It's fine. Get back to providing value. But you can scoop out that content, and there's 2 different things you can do with it. One is you can run that as an ad, paid ad. We'll get to paid ads later. You can run that, and that's usually like some of the best types of content, stuff that wasn't intended to be an ad, but then becomes one, and those murder because the platform already shows that they like it. The second is that you can create a list of greatest hits, all right? And this is what I did with our sales team, is that over time, you make enough content, you'll start having more of these, right? And usually they'll hit some specific concern of a prospect. This is gonna take too long. This might be too complicated. Does it work in my area? Whatever your thing is, right? And so what happens is, if you create that list of basically objections that people usually struggle with, and then the content that you've created that matches or overcomes those objections, you can then have the sales team have their greatest hits of tools they can use to crack through that excuse. And so if someone's struggling with it, then they can send them 1 or 2 pieces of content that are guised as content, but really are sales tools. And so it also gets them to consume more of your content between calls, and they're more likely to close, all right? And so if you label the hit with the problem it solves and the benefit provides the prospect, you can match the prospect with the thing that's right for them. So like the perfect bullet for the prospect to overcome it. All right. Number 5 is that free content retains paying customers. This one's actually a really interesting one that I've found over time, is that how a customer gets value from you matters less than where they got it from, okay? So let me explain what that means. So imagine a person pays for your thing and then consumes your free content. So they're a paying customer and they consume your free stuff. If your free content is valuable, they will like you more and stay loyal to your business as a paying customer longer. Because they don't separate where they got value from. They just know they got value from you and that the value they got was in excess of what they paid. And so in a very real way, more amazing free content retains the people who choose to pay. Because people are typically afraid, or business owners are typically afraid of giving away too much free stuff. But the thing is that you're not disenfranchising the people who are paying you. You're just further reinforcing that you are the right choice. Number 6, people don't have shorter attention spans, they have higher standards. I'm just repeating this because I think it's a main point, all right? There is no such thing as too long, only too boring. So streaming platforms have proven that people will spend hours binging long-form content if they like it. So make good stuff people like and reap the rewards rather than whining about people's shorter attention spans. I just want to reinforce this point because it's a big lesson for me and it just gets out of the excuse of all the algorithm obsession. It doesn't serve you. It doesn't matter. Focus on the value and the rest will take care of itself. And then 7, this is a tiny tip that I just want to share with you that we found on our team and me personally, is avoid pre-scheduling posts. Okay, so this is kind of weird. Like this is a weird, like borderline woo-woo, but I don't think it's woo, and I think I can explain it. Is that the posts that I manually post perform better than the ones that I pre-schedule. That's an observation. My explanation for it, I can't prove. This is just my explanation for what I think it is that when you manually post, you know that within seconds you're going to be rewarded or punished for the quality of the content. And so what it does, in my opinion, is it gives you that last little second of like, is this good enough? Or like, do I really need to tweak this caption? Or is this headline right? And it just gets that last little bit because you're about to get rewarded or about to get punished the moment you press submit. And when you're planning out a month of content, you don't have that immediate feedback that's going to happen. That's just a little tip that I have found, is that our manual posts record better. So even if we prepare stuff ahead of time, we still manually post it because it gives it that one last look before it goes live, and we found that works better for us. And so I told you at the beginning that I would show you my first post ever, so this should hopefully break the ice for you, is that you've probably been providing value to other humans knowingly or unknowingly for a while, all right? So this may be contrary to what you might have expected me to say, but the first post you make, it can kind of be like a State of the Union or a big announcement or like a coming out, if you will. You're making it known to the world of a new change in your life, okay? And so in that first post, believe it or not, you can make an ask. And it's because you've actually probably been giving for a very long period of time. So within the ratio, you're probably okay, all right? And so this was my first post I ever made. You can see 2013. So this marks my decade in business. So everyone, for those of you who know me, you know two things. One, I'm terrible with all things technological. For example, I heard about Spotify just a few weeks ago, seriously, haha. And two, I love training, nutrition, and fitness for more than just about a whole lot. So today is sort of special because it marks the day where my love of training vanquished, me trying to be fancy with my words, my fear of technology. So what do I mean? For the better part of a year, I've been taking part in a free personal training project with the idea that I'd give away my personal training to anyone who was willing to give some of their $500 to $1,000 to a cause of their choice. This way, they wouldn't have to be motivated by the same thing as me, but be motivated to give to their cause and benefit themselves. When I first introduced the idea, I was happily surprised at the amount of positive support I received. So almost a year from my first client, I now have a website to formally show some of the transformation that have gone underway using my programming as a formal means of contacting me about signing up. I currently have a few slots open in my roster, so drop me a note quickly. If you're interested, thanks so much. Take a second to check out some of the ridiculous transformations in record time. Check it out. Do I think this is the best post ever? No. Do I smile? I mean, you can probably see them smiling reading it, because like, I'm proud of that guy, you know what I mean? I had a job, and I did all the stuff I'm telling you guys to do. I reached out to people who knew me, and I started training them, and I did it for a year. You know, I did it for a long time before really even announcing this to the world. And so it took me a year before I even made a post. So I was doing it privately via DMs for a whole year before I even announced this stuff. And so pretty cool for me to show you this, but I was just glad I was able to dig this up. And I just say, like, just start, just make the first post. And if you make a post and you don't have a following, that's okay. You might have to start giving more for a longer period of time before you can make an ask. Again, and that's okay. You didn't expect it to be easy. Of course it wouldn't be. Most things worth doing aren't. Okay, so don't be afraid of what other people think. If someone won't speak at your funeral, you shouldn't care about their opinion while you're alive, all right? So just something that helps me get through some of the harder times. And so that was my first post, and you might be wondering, what are benchmarks? All right, and so here's my rule of thumb for you. I'm not gonna give you as many metrics, but if our audience grows, we did good, all right? If our audience grows fast, we did gooder, all right? So I like to measure my audience size and speed of growth monthly. So a rule of thumb that I like to follow is the more things you measure, the more ways you can win, all right? And I got that from Dr. K. So total followers and reach is how big. So you think about impressions and you think about followers. So if I go from 1,000 followers across all platforms to 1,500, I grew my audience by 500. Amazing, right? A reach example is I go from 10,000 people seeing my stuff to 15,000 people seeing my stuff. I grew my reach by 5,000. Amazing, right? Different way is the rate, so the speed of getting followers and reach. So how fast, all right? So example, if I gained those 500 followers in a month, that would make it a 50% growth month. So 500 new over 1,000 starting is 50% growth. Awesome. Example, if I reached those 5,000 extra people in a month, that would be making a 50% growth month from an impression standpoint. This takes maybe 60 minutes once a month to test this out. And if getting that data is enough to keep you going, because I can tell you in the early days on YouTube, because I didn't have a following, I started with 0. Like, fun side note, everyone starts at 0. Like everyone, every single account you see on every social media platform started at 0. Every one of them. And so if you were starting at 0, that's fine, all right? Like, it's okay, it's normal. And the cool thing is when you start at 0, your actual growth percentages are usually like insane. And so if you go from like 10 people viewing a video to 50 people, like, you should be stoked. And I'll just give you a little wrinkle for me personally. In the earlier days when I was getting 10 view videos and things like that, I used to think to myself, well, I used to pitch weight loss one-on-one. So if I got 10 people that got to see my thing, like that's a big win for me. And so if you think about it as a room of people that you're in and you're talking to them, it's still a super efficient way to reach lots of people, even if it doesn't feel big. And the only reason it doesn't feel big is because you're comparing yourself to somebody who's been doing it 10 times longer than you or 100 times longer than you. So if you can remove that comparison in terms of how you're doing and simply compare it to what you were doing as the alternative, which is probably in person or probably zero, or what you did yesterday, what you did last month, you'll have a lot more forward momentum, in my opinion, or at least that's what's worked for me, okay? So compare your growth between months and ignore everyone else. Now, remember, we can only control inputs. Measuring outputs is only useful if we're consistent with inputs. So pick the posting cadence you want to stick with on a particular platform. Then pick your ask cadence on that platform. That's how you're going to direct people to become engaged leads. And then start and do not stop. It's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't stop once you start. So those are the benchmarks, and that is how you monetize content.